Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Campbell. I'm a doula in Washoe County, Nevada, a Medicaid provider, a lactation educator, childbirth educator, and mom of 18. You can find me and connect on doulainreno.com. Remember, give a shout out to those who are brave enough to share their stories with us on how they have become parents. Let's dive in. Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Campbell, and today I'm on with Graciela. How are you today?
I'm doing so great, Jennifer. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited. Also, I want to point out that you have a 4-year-old that's got special needs who is in the vicinity, and I told you I do not want you to be stressed about that this is real
Thank
moments,
you.
real life. So people are aware of that if there are any interruptions. I want you to jump in and tell us a story about what it was like for you to become a parent.
So I actually became a parent when I was 13. My mother had our youngest sibling. She had many, what are the words? Miscarriages in between us. So I'm 13 years older, and she went to work right after. So I was there.
Wow.
She walked in. We lived in Puerto Rico, so I have no idea what the child safety laws are there, but I was 13 alone with a newborn, and bless her heart, my mother worked full time, right? So,
Wow.
she would walk in and find me with the baby on my hip, bathing her. You know how you wash a newborn, you first wash the head, and then you flip the baby and you wash the back, all in the sink, right? I don't even know where I learned that at this point. I just know that I was head first with a baby sibling and never needed any more toys and grew up so quick, right? So she was my first try. I feel like, my mother would ask me what my toddler sister wanted because I would understand her. And now she's 25 and I'm 38 and we're extremely close. So that was great. And
Wow.
then, yeah. And then my husband and I met when he was a single father with full custody of 5
Okay.
children.
How old were
So
you then? I mean,
I was 30.
okay, so you're older, time's passed, you basically raised your little sister and you had that's a lot of parenting experience. It's not like babysitting for a sibling every once in a while. You were legitimately raising your sister full time, it sounds like. And so you understand kids and everything. That's fine. Your younger sister was an adult, but 5 kids is a lot to take on, especially if you aren't a mom yourself. So how did
Yeah,
that
so
happen? How was that?
I know, right? And also becoming a step parent before becoming a parent. That was very interesting, I feel like.
Yeah.
Um, like, do you hear him calling me? I'm sorry.
No.
So the oldest was 18 and the youngest was 9. So out of 5, 9-year-old and 11-year-old were basically the ones more involved when it came to becoming a stepmother. The
Right.
others were 14, 16, 18, so they were much older. And now the youngest just turned 18, so we did it. Yay.
Yay.
But that was intense, right? Going into a relationship, a brand new relationship, to fill a void that was much needed and to dive in head first. And it just didn't seem out of character to me. Highly sensitive empath, moon in Cancer. I don't know if you know about that, but it's just very nurturing, right? Very what is needed, what can I do, very service oriented. And so I just dove in head first. And then of course, as we become more serious and I move in and we continue growing as a family, we start talking about children. But so we met 2016. In 2015, I had a severe endometriosis surgery where I lost my right ovary, and I went into the surgery single and with no children. with the doctor telling me you might come out with a full hysterectomy and we don't know what we're going to find when we go in. So we'll see. Thank you so
Great.
much. Right?
Perfect.
Yeah. It was very stressful. And I never imagined having kids, never even pondered the idea of children, right? With my own trauma, with my own, business and whatever, until I come out of the surgery and, we had to remove the ovary, but everything else is great. No cancer, no this, no that. If you want to have children, you should have one right away.
Yes. Yes,
And
that's
I
always
was
the way.
right. And I was 29 at this time, single and with no kids. So I was like, oh, great. First, I need to find who to have kids with. Thanks for the ultimatum, right?
Right.
It was an ultimatum.
Yeah.
And I had issues with endometriosis forever, but never really dove into birth control as a form to help the endometriosis. Never really educated myself the way I should have. That's really the bottom line.
Mm.
And never really received guidance from someone who knew the way it works for other people. So it is what it was, right? And when we meet and we dive into that relationship, we just knew children, I wanted to at least try for one, right? And it was actually a deal breaker of mine. If I'm going to date someone and they say they want no more children, then that's not going to work.
Right.
But anyway, fast forward to 2018, first time ever dropping the pill with the purpose of getting pregnant. I had no idea what was going to happen. But we tried for about 4 months and then got pregnant, right? And then I had to deal with people letting me know that most first pregnancies never make it.
Oh my gosh, people
I
are
know, right?
terrible. I don't
Oh my gosh, I
understand.
know.
Why do they see you pregnant in like every horror story? Okay. Yeah, but I just don't
Or
understand.
right. Or the fear of my own endometriosis, right? Like it was my own anxiety kind of course flared up with all those insecurities. And becoming a parent means nothing. I mean, a step parent means nothing compared to having your own, right? So I had no idea. There's no comparison in my head.
Right.
But it was all good, right? I had a great pregnancy. It was healthy, so on and so forth. And then my own ignorance. So I do know a doula, a local doula, whom I always had in the back of my head, but just never educated myself as to what are the differences between your gynecologist or your OBGYN and a doula. Like, what are the pros and cons? Maybe some testimonials. I wasn't a coach back then. I
Okay.
wasn't into coaching people. So I didn't coach myself through any of it. And I tend to isolate when I bring something up and I get that negative response, like, oh, first babies never make it. Like, oh, okay, we're not talking about anything now, right? And so he had an April 29th, what's the word? Due
Due
date,
date.
right? And my birthday is April 26th.
Okay.
And in my own ignorance, I thought I want him to be an April baby. So
Okay.
what can I do to get that baby out before, because everybody would be telling me first babies are always late. First babies will be there for a longer week than your due date. And it's like all this input that you don't really ask for, right? But people give. And so in my head, I thought I want him to be an April baby. I don't know why. Gosh, so ignorant. These are the things I think back on. And so I remember going to my OBGYN, the same people that did my surgery. They're still, we still go and whatever. Great practice here in Central Florida. And so I asked her about what is it that they do? You open something.
Are you talking about stripping your membranes?
Yes.
Okay.
So on my last visit before his due date, I said,
Yeah, yeah.
hey, I've been doing all these other things. I walk 3 miles a day, I squat, I'm doing all these things to help him along because it's my first baby. We didn't know if it was going to be a normal birth or a C-section. I did have a C-section on my surgery because it was the only way they would remove the ovary. So I
Oh
had a
yeah.
C-section in 2015, right? And so she removes my membrane, and I went into labor the very next day.
Mhm.
That was April 25th, the day before my birthday. And my birthday comes along, and I spent it all in the hospital with contractions and with pain. And by the end of my birthday, I'm talking 11 p.m. Now it's an emergency thing because of meconium and all these other things. And he's been in there too long and you're not dilated enough. And he ended up being an emergency C-section on the 27th. But I remember sitting on my birthday with my husband and my mother and nobody else, just the nurses that come in and out, thinking to myself, I wish I had the doula here. Like I thought
Oh,
about it for so long. Yeah, because I'm a brand new mom.
yeah,
My husband is the father of 5, but he's a man.
right,
And my mother was there, but she was just there.
right.
So I felt extremely anxious, guilty, right?
Yeah,
Like all these things that I knew were not helping my body along.
right.
I didn't know that because I knew enough at that point to kind of feel my own body just not okay.
Mhm.
And so when I stopped dilating, never dilated anymore after that. And once they gave me the epidural, because I asked for it after like 8 hours trying on my own, nothing really happened after that. Right. But it's like, a lot of people complain about the medical field and how quick it is, right? The doctor is in and sees you and he's out.
Mhm.
And bless their heart, they have all these things to do. I get it. But it doesn't feel good when you're on the other end, right? And so the nurses will come in and say things like, I really don't remember, but I'm just improvising here. They'll say something like, if you don't do this, then you're not going to dilate. Little comments like that are part of their job, but they seem insensitive, especially
Mhm.
for sensitive people, right? And for a new mom who has no idea what she's doing, like,
Right,
how do I do that? Can I stand up? No, you already have the epidural.
right.
Can I squat? No, you're too late for that. Oh my gosh, okay. Um, Give me the peanut ball. How do you know about that? Well, I did my research. Where is it? Right. And so we did everything. And in the end, when my water broke and they saw that it was filled with meconium, it was just over in a second. And it's so funny because it ended up being 28 hours. But C-sections are so quick. That kid was born in 20 minutes. So I was like, whoa, we could have done this like all along if it had been on the plan from the beginning to just do a C-section, which of course it's always an option, but people tend to, want to do it the hard way or whatever, right? And so he was born at 3:18 on the day after my birthday. 9 pounds, 1 ounce.
Mhm.
I feel like that may be a reason why also he was not like getting through. I don't know, but that's a big baby. And he was okay, but then he got taken to the NICU. He had water in his lungs. I remember my husband saying he's the most quiet baby I've ever had because he didn't cry right away, and that was part of the problem. But of course, I don't know anything. And then they took him and I got really sad. And even to this day, right, he's almost 5, there's some separation anxiety for both of us, really. When I go and leave him with a sitter or leave him with my husband or leave him with any capable human being, I feel very anxious. And there's that separation anxiety from him as well. So, we'll work on that as he grows up and whatnot. But I sometimes wonder, um, did I have anything to do? And of course, him being taken away. I did, as soon as he got taken away and I saw him with all, the feeding
Yep.
tube and oxygen, I said, I'm not breastfeeding, because I look at him, how am I going to put him through all of the trouble of now this one and now the other one and now we have to flip you? Like, it just felt like I didn't want to put more on my child. He was being poked on his feet every 3 hours to get blood. He was alone in the NICU, so I just felt, I guess, defeated in that sense. And I decided to pump, so I pumped. And even when we got home, I tried to breastfeed and there was a lot of resistance there. Now we know, right, a lot of the issues. But there was resistance there. And I just felt like, I guess, so responsible for pushing it, pushing that due date to when I want it to, which is incredibly selfish, right? That I didn't want to push anymore. So I didn't. And so I just pumped for as long as I could. And then I had to fly to Puerto Rico for a wedding. So I stopped it and I said, okay, it's time for formula, because I'm not going to be flying and pumping and alone with a child and all these things. So with a C-section, with a newborn, something's got to give. So I just stopped trying and went to formula. So that's pretty much it.
I mean, there's so much here, right? From the perspective of me being a doula. Um, and I think you're right. First, you can't fix any of it. We can't go back and redo it. Someone was like, well, what do you think about that situation? Well, you can't have the situation with the intervention and the situation with the same person without the intervention. There's lots of statistics, but I don't know the differences. I don't know what would have happened. Getting your membrane stripped is pretty common. It can send you into labor. It doesn't always send you into labor. I mean, that's pretty innocuous. It's definitely a standard for OB, but it's not even that a midwife wouldn't do it for a home birth. It's just a way to kind of wake up your cervix to start things up. So I'm not necessarily for or against it, because women have to make their own decision, but that didn't, excuse me. I mean, I hope that if we can tackle one thing, it's that I don't feel like you were being selfish trying to get him to be born on a specific day. I think most women, when they're at the end of their pregnancies, want to do the same thing. Maybe they don't have a birthday. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. I know it's coming. um, but getting your membrane stripped, it's so common to have your membrane stripped that that doesn't even like stand out as anything that's a big deal to me. If I had been your doula, I would have had to ask you, like, are you doing it for the right reasons? Can this help? Yes. If you go into labor, I mean, you're going to anyway. You're going to go into labor anyway. And if it's a mild thing that can wake up your cervix, especially when you're at the end of, like, at the very close to your due date or past it, and it's something a woman wants to do, it's I mean, okay, but I wouldn't beat yourself up too much about that. The the lack of education, I think, is the single biggest thing with all women, because when we do this the first time, myself included, I mean, that's why I went into this as a profession. You do this for the first time and you think it will just, I don't know what we think, like our bodies will just know and we'll just do it. We depend on the medical staff. We think it will be fine. We don't understand interventions like epidurals and what that means, like in a big picture or at the moment. Um, I talk about the cascade of interventions, which once you start one thing, then there's the next thing, then there's the next thing, then you're in a C-section. And how can you utilize those as tools of labor and delivery that will help, instead of putting you on a conveyor belt of the hospital wanting to get you out the door? And there's so much in that. I'm at the hospital more than I'm at home births at this point, and I love it, but I think it's because you learn to navigate that system and what your clients want. And I want my clients to be super educated, because I wasn't either, just like you. They finally convinced me to do an epidural, and I was at the very end. And when the anesthesiologist, he started to put the needle in and he pulled it out and said, she's pushing. And so the only reason I didn't get one was because I held out long enough and he noticed. Or I
Right.
would have had one at the very end, which is the stupidest thing ever. She was born less than 10 minutes later. So I think the lack of education or misinformation. TikTok is a culture now of misinformation. I mean, not that it's all misinformation, but it started this whole trend of people sharing things in a way that I think is really skewed. And not that it wasn't happening before, it won't happen afterwards, but we have no information or misinformation. And those are terrifying things to go in to have a baby with.
Right. Right. And to me, well, of course, now in hindsight, which is 2020, obviously,
Right.
um, that birth and actually him was a catalyst for me to work on myself, do the therapy, become a coach, and learn all these very simple principles, I feel like, that are simple now,
Right.
that didn't seem so, that were not in the periphery then. Like, your confidence is directly correlated to your level of preparedness. That's one of my
Right.
tenets, right? That's one of my tenets when my clients get really nervous and I'm like, well, have you done everything you can to prepare? Well, then let's reframe to excitement, because what are we so nervous about? But I was really nervous back
Yep.
then because I didn't feel like I was prepared enough, and I didn't realize it until the very last minute, obviously. And then when I looked around, that's when I thought, was the doula supposed to be here the whole time to
Mhm.
hold my hand and to tell me what to do? Because nobody else is telling me, right? Everybody's coming in to check in on me. Everybody's coming in to check on the numbers, but no one is telling me, I don't know, breathe
Right.
or just relax your body, right? Nobody there to notice how anxious I was and to say, relax, mama, relax. It's going
Right.
to be fine, right?
Right.
And your mother and your spouse are great, but they're not professionals in the field. So there's a level of distrust when it comes to your mother saying, you're doing awesome, to a medical expert who actually does this saying, you are doing awesome. Okay, well, then
Right.
I must do something
I
right.
mean, I think like the biggest thing with doulas is the education in the beginning. So I'm not telling you what to do. You already know what you want to do because you've been educated, we've talked about it, and you've made the decision. So I'm supporting you in the decisions you're making. I don't have to tell you to do them. There are often though things that come up that you don't expect, but you're educated on if those come up. And so we can switch gears if we need to. We can change things if we need to, but you're already so educated that you know what you want. And then it's getting that support. Husbands are amazing. I have the most amazing husbands because I want them at the prenatal appointments. It's a prerequisite for me. I'm not, yeah, I'm there for the mom, but he's my team. And mothers and in-laws, worst. They're the worst in that room. And I'm a mother. I was a doula for my daughter, and I'm like, I need your list and your preferences. You can't be in mommy mode when you're supporting your daughter or your wife in labor. You're watching the person that you love more than anything go through more pain and more stress and more uncertainty even with education, and you can't waffle. You've got to be there and be strong for her and also be educated. And most moms and husbands, if they aren't, they aren't. So they're a
Mhm.
liability. They make it worse. Yeah.
Yeah, and
um
there's a lot of pressures on mothers as well, like, the mother of the mother, the grandma, let's call the grandma. There's a lot of pressure on the grandmas as well. And I, in my own ignorance again, right? I never thought about what were her birth of us
yeah.
like, right? I mean, I
Right.
knew that she didn't use epidural, and I know that we were not C-sections, so she had us. Okay, great. But what was that like? We never
Hmm.
had that conversation.
Yeah.
My mother doesn't live here, so we talk on the phone, and it's like when you're calling someone who lives far away, you don't really get into those investigative conversations of, tell me about our birth and how was that
Right.
and how long
Or
between, right?
that you would even think it would make a difference to have that conversation with her, which it would have made it could have
Exactly.
made a huge difference in that situation,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, it's just a lack of knowing like what to ask and who to ask what to and how to ask the question and how to be educated and then how to advocate for yourself. And we're not taught. I mean, how many women in any situation, right? Educate themselves and advocate for themselves well, set boundaries, say no, are confident and secure, know what they want.
Yeah, we don't learn
You're
that.
coaching.
Right.
We aren't good at that. And then you're
Right.
put in a situation where you're expected to do that. Oh, and also you're going to be in more pain than you've ever been in, and the decision making part of your brain will shut down naturally in labor because that's what your body because you shouldn't be making decisions. Now, I want to move forward a little bit because it sounds like he had meconium aspiration. He inhaled the and those are one of those things that happen, and there's not a lot that you could have done differently, most likely, for that to not happen. And sometimes it's worse than others. But I think, as women, we beat ourselves up like, I somehow did this to my son. My decisions made this happen. And that's not necessarily true at all. Um, but then the spiral of overwhelm, and failing, you already have shame, guilt, and failure. Baby's 5 minutes old. So not nursing and making look, you're right. When something's got to give, something's got to give. And breastfeeding is not the only way to feed a child and love them.
Correct.
So, but
Correct.
I know you feel that you feel those decisions and if you could have done them differently. I want to switch gears though, because I know that wasn't your fault, but I also know you did a lot of work and became a coach. And I want to end kind of on how that experience made you want to transition into this and what you do now for people.
Sure. Thank you. So I was in real estate, and there's a lot of coaching that happens in real estate, especially when you're an agent that works with buyers,
Mm.
because packing up your family and uprooting them to go to a different city is a major life transition. It demands someone to be there holding your hand. It doesn't seem like it, but that's what a realtor does in most cases. And so for 8 years, I was working with buyers specifically, and there's a lot of coaching there, right? A lot of reassurance, a lot of positive psychology, right? When they want to quit the deal and it's like, no, let's talk about your motivation for this beautiful house, right? And so when I had him, I was still in real estate. But I did have an aha moment when we came home, and I'm looking at my beautiful child a week later. He was in NICU for 4 days. Looking at my beautiful child, very quiet. I'm just contemplating my newborn, right? And my mother said to me, if you don't talk to him, he will never speak. So it was an aha moment in the sense of advocating for myself. Can I have a moment to look at this beautiful child? Like, we have all the time in the world to teach him how to speak. Surely I can take 5 minutes to observe him. Like, I'm a first time mom. I'm still like in freaking freeze mode. I was in freeze mode actually. And so that moment made me really realize I know I'm a highly sensitive person. I know, possibly in the spectrum too. A lot of people believe that highly sensitive people are in the spectrum. Um, and I've known these things about myself my whole life, but now I need to make sure that if he's a highly sensitive child, I advocate for him. I accommodate him. I'm talking, highly sensitive people may be sensitive to light or to noise, or the TV is too loud, or no, I don't like that food because of the texture, or this is, choking me, so I want to take it off. And when you're a child who wants to take off a sweater, the mother is like, no, it's cold. How are you going to take off your sweater? You can't. But when you're advocating for a child with special needs, you want to take your sweater off, let's take it off, right? And I know those things now, but back then all I had was that moment of like, excuse me, I'm going to have a moment with my child, and I will defend this moment with my life. And I just went back to work, right? He went and he had a sitter. My mother went back home, bless her heart. And we went back to life. But then the pandemic started. So he was born in 2019. And with the pandemic, I got furloughed like many other people.
Uh-huh.
And so I lost my job. And I had to have that conversation of, well, what's next for me? I could still become an agent somewhere else. I could work as a real estate agent in another company. Or, we could do something different. Right. And we had that conversation. And the fact that I was coaching for so long, in a sense, made me think about going back to school to finish psychology masters to really help people. But then the conversation was between a master's degree or a certification, which is very different.
Mhm.
So I found the most legit certification I could find, got the money together, and got certified. And it became a personal work, obviously, of dismantling and advocating and learning all these things, and then deciding who am I going to help and how am I going to target people. And so I've been working with highly sensitive people ever since. And
Mm.
so that's where it started. I'll never forget that day. If you don't talk to him, as it turns out, I'm pretty nonverbal myself. I will
Mm.
process 100 things in total quiet, and you may think I'm spaced out. You may think I'm in a bad mood, and I'm just processing, right? And
Right.
so that's what I was doing. Um,
So how
yeah.
did you realize the furlough happened, COVID happened, you switched gears, which was a blessing in disguise. At what point, because I have a son who's an adult now, most of my kids are adults. He's 25 and he's autistic and he's moderately autistic and he's in an independent living program and I'm very proud of that. Um, when he was 2, we knew he was behind. Like, there are certain markers. He potty trained easier than any of the other kids, but there were other things, like, that were markers that he was not meeting. His verbal markers were one of them. But, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, they didn't know as much as they know now. But when did you start to notice things were different, other than your mom saying he'll never talk if you don't talk to them? I mean, yes and no. I think that that's true, but it made you aware.
She was anxious too. Let's just call her comment anxiety, right?
Okay.
Like, because what kind of comment is that? Please. I am going to
Not a
speak the
great one. Not a
I
great one.
mean, we're talking about a 4-day-old. Like, we have all the time in the world to talk to him. Where is this coming from? So,
Right.
um, so there were a lot of red flags that I not necessarily ignored or disregarded, but we just held off to see. For
Okay.
example, I'm bilingual. My first language is Spanish. Everybody in my family speaks Spanish. Everybody in our home, my stepchildren and my husband, speak English. And when he
Okay.
was born, I said to myself, oh, he needs to be bilingual. So many open doors, so many opportunities. So I'm going to speak to him in Spanish and everybody else can speak to him in English, blah, 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 blah. And for
Okay.
bilingual toddlers, some of them are delayed because, I mean, you're speaking to them in 2 languages. So
Right.
where do I start? Right. And so he turned 2 and didn't speak much. He turned 3 and started with some phrases and whatnot. But the pediatrician was always like, if he's bilingual, let's just wait. If he's bilingual, we're going to
Okay.
wait. Right. Okay. That's fine. Now, when he turned 4, I started noticing other things, like the very obvious neurodivergent signs and struggling with transitions and no, I want this way, not the way mama is telling me, right?
Okay.
Preference for foods. When he was a toddler, I would get him all messy with pasta and whatnot. I mean, when he was an infant. And then once he turned 2 and 3, he's like, nope, 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 nope. Right. So we started making notes of those things. And when he turned 3.5, I said to my husband, I would like to try something because I want him to speak, right? Don't we want him to get along? I want to try
Right.
dropping the Spanish. I want to try dropping that pressure. because everybody else in the house speaks English. I have 2 of those teenagers still here, right? So everybody speaks English with him except mama. So I said, why don't we try dropping it and see what happens with his language development? And by the time he was 4, he was saying so many things. I'm talking 9-word sentences. I'm so excited to go to the park.
Okay.
I'm so excited to get in the car. You know, can I go outside to play with the dolphin? What? Yeah, you can go outside to play with the dolphin. And so I dropped the bilingual. I'm over it. You
Okay.
know, he'll learn if he wants to. It'll be his choice. And I'm not going to push it. Right. Which I think
Right.
it's like where a lot of frustration comes in for parents. Right. And so he started talking great, and it kind of eased on the pressure of, well, is he neurodivergent? Is he special needs and whatnot? Until the summer came for me to really make sure he was potty trained to go into pre-K.
Right.
And that's when my pushing for that really caused a regression in other areas. And that's when we were like, oh, okay. So we really do need to look into this. We really do need professional help. I'm really out of my depth here. So let's get those things done. And that was the thing, because there's a profile. Sorry, I thought classification, but it's profile. There's a profile under the autism spectrum that has to do with the child's need. I'm talking subconscious, for autonomy, equality, and autonomy and equality. That's basically it. And so if he's in that profile, whatever you push on him, his brain will be like, nope, that's not me. I don't want to do that. And will get blocked. And when a child is blocked like that in survival brain, there's no learning.
Right.
There's nothing that can happen. And so when I started pushing, no, but you have to go to school. We're so excited to go to school in the fall. Here's the little toilet, here's your potty, blah, blah, blah. Let's do this. Run, right? Go to the toilet, go to the potty, all of that. Like I stress myself out just thinking about it, right? Like all of that, go. Like some children just don't flow like that.
Right.
And so that was the moment. So right now he's homeschooled. He will be homeschooled for as long as it needs to be. We will accommodate him, however, but that was the moment for us to be like, wait a minute. I mean, that's not normal, right?
Right.
You know, being a little delayed in the speech, bilingual, okay, fine. Doing these things and doing other things, it's like, well, you know, he's still extremely affectionate, looks at you in the eye, and has all these other things, right? He loves to play with his older siblings, even though they're much older. He loves the dogs. He's not necessarily gentle, but what kid is gentle with a dog, right? He has food preferences, but Dada is very picky. So, right? So we had all these things, but when potty training was the one red flag that I was like, surely it shouldn't be this difficult.
Right.
Or not difficult, but it shouldn't seem like such a danger to him. And that's the PDA profile. The whatever it is, it could be, here's an ice cream, and the child touches it and did not realize that it was cold. And if that's the profile, the PDA profile, the brain will say nope, and the child drops the ice cream.
Right.
They do it on purpose? No, but you know.
I want to end with a question. How has your coaching business helped your parenting, and your parenting helped your coaching business?
Oh, such a great question. And it's difficult to navigate, right? Like, am I a parent right now, or am I a coach? With Elijah, because he's only 4, and he has inadvertently categorized me as the safe person. So currently I'm the one that understands everything he says. I'm the one that anticipates his needs, right? But with the teenagers, it's, you know, do you want me to be your stepmom right now, or do you want me to coach you? Because coaching is asking questions and holding space. But if I'm your mother, I'm going to give you advice, right? Or
Right.
I'm going to hope that you do something specific. But it's transformed our life in that way. Even our conversations, our spousal conversations have transformed because it's the same thing. Do you want my opinion, or would you like me to ask some
Yep.
objective questions that could really bring your perspective to the broader lens? I now feel like everybody should hire a coach at some point.
Mhm.
If anybody listening is already in therapy, a lot of people like myself do both at the same time, and it's very complementary like that. So it transformed our life to the better, absolutely. And it tends to get me out of my own anxiety, because I'll switch my own demeanor from the anxious mother to the professional who detaches and
Yep.
sees with perspective. And it's hard because I'm a mom. So I want everything for him and I want him to be super comfortable. But at the same time, I have to challenge him. Right.
Yeah.
And so becoming a coach really has given me like that kind of vote of confidence that
Oh, okay.
I'm
That's a
going to,
great way to put it.
right, I'm going to push you, and I know you're okay, and I know I'm okay on my end, and let's see what happens. Let's experiment. That's a huge word in coaching, right? Experimenting with things until something really clicks without the pressure, without somebody else's agenda, right? And so it's been wonderful in that way.
Graciela, thank you so much for being on. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, thank you.
So fun.
I didn't know what to expect. I was like, I'm going to talk about my birth for the first time ever, probably the last. And I'm just so grateful, and grateful for women like you who assist others in such a magical way. I mean, you are such a bridge, right? You
Oh, thank
bridge
you.
this experience, and that's a magical task. So I love that you do that.